Hi, everyone, and welcome to another talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. I am one of your two hosts. My name is Nor Kyle.
And I'm the other one of your two hosts, the two of your two hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
Here we are. My synapse here. And do you want to give our spiel today, Mushtaq?
Sure.
Go for it.
So, first of all, before we do anything else, let me encourage you. If you are listening to us on YouTube after the fact, look down there and you'll see a subscribe button if you're not subscribed to us. Go ahead and subscribe to us. And if you like, be sure to click that little bell icon so that you can be notified when we send out a new video, which happens at least once a week. And welcome. If you'd like to be part of the live talk, you'll see a link down there in the description to our mailing list. And we send out the link to the live talk every week. And you're welcome to come. You're welcome to participate. You're welcome to not participate and just sit there and look at us. It's all good. So we have that going on. We are in the first week of our retreat, virtual retreat, and it's going quite well. And we have a couple of updates on that. So I will turn this over to Noor.
Yeah, okay. So I wrote up the packet that we've sent out, the retreat packet. And you may notice in there that the dates for the third and fourth group sessions on Zoom have the wrong dates. You know, there's no Saturday, October 18th, for example, this month. So to correct my mistake, I want to let you all know that the third session will be on October 17th, and the fourth session will be on October 24th. Those are both Saturdays. Everything else is the same. So there you go. Just make sure you correct that, and we should be good to go. This upcoming talk next week, Saturday, on the 10th of October, is the same. That stays the same, as does our last talk, the fifth one, which will be taking place on Sunday, November 1st, at 4 p.m. There you go.
So what are we going to do tonight, Brain?
Well, this evening we are going to be talking about I am. Yes, this is a pretty famous phrase when it's heard as I am that I am, and we're going to have a discussion unpacking this phrase.
Yeah.
So, Mushtaq, why don't you lead us into that?
Okay, so this is interesting because you have these two different streams of I am, one of which was created here in the United States around the 1930s by a couple, what was their names? The Ballards, I think. I can't remember their first names. They created the so-called I Am movement, which has had several spin-offs like the Summit Lighthouse and the Church Universal and Triumphant and all of that kind of stuff. This we're not terribly interested in. This was, okay, we got to do a little biblical work to look at that one side. So in the book of Exodus, Moses goes up to wherever and there's a burning bush. And the burning bush says, hey, I'm God, and you're going to have to go back to Egypt and tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. And they have a pretty big discussion about that. And at the end of it, Moses says to the burning bush, they're going to want to know who sent me. Who shall I tell them sent me? And the burning bush says, Iye Ashar Iye. Tell them Iye sent you. Now, that phrase is usually translated in the Christian Bible as I am that I am. But it's a mistranslation. Now, people will jump through all sorts of hoops to make it okay to say that translation. But the fact of the matter is that yeah comes from the um, Hebrew root to be, and there is no present tense to be in Hebrew. You can either do an I was or an I will be, but you can't use that word to say I am. So the actual translation, according to the language in which it was originally written, would be most accurately, I will be that I will be. So be that as it may, and you can look this up on the interwebs. I don't take my word for it. Or ask a rabbi. That's always fun because they actually know what the Hebrew says, as opposed to all the Christians on the planet who don't. So, because of that little mistake, uh, this whole cult movement showed up around the I am and being one with God and all of this and doing weird stuff to get what you want, like decreeing. I used to listen to the grandmother of a friend of mine who was a member of one of these groups, and she would sit for hours reading these so-called decrees off of a piece of paper that the church sent her. And it would be, I am decreeing this, I am decreeing that, I am decreeing this other thing. Um, and that's not what we're interested in. Now, there's a whole other side to this that you find in Advaita. You all know what Advaita means? Advaita is a Sanskrit word that means not two. It doesn't mean unity. It doesn't mean oneness. It literally means not two. When you see an a in the beginning of a Sanskrit word, it's usually a negation. So you have Dvaita, which is two. Then you have the a, which negates the two, not two. Now, this is a fairly prominent movement in Hinduism. You have Advaita Vedanta and a few other things, and you have some big name enlightened guys. Probably the best known of which is Ramana Maharishi, and they had a different take on I am, and they used it as a placeholder for the true experience. Now, Ramana said, sit down and ask yourself, who am I? And keep asking the question until you know. Now, the thing is, if you do that, you will go through maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of I am this, I am that. I am a mother, a father, a husband, a wife, a son, a daughter. I am an American, I am an Australian. I'm a Muslim, I'm a Jew. All of these things. These are what we call is of identities. And the human mind loves the is of identity for some reason. Uh, but eventually, you will cut through all of those because proper inquiry negates them. And what happens in reality is you get to this place where you experience your own you-ness without identification to an object of your experience. And that's usually glossed as I am, though in reality, it's not I am, it's just sort of am. And that's the Vedantic take on this, the Advaitic take. And that's closer to what we're interested in this evening. The I am of the I am movement is all about the ego. It's all about getting the ego things and having the ego be one with God and all of that kind of stuff. And I don't know why God would want your ego to be one with him. But there have been other approaches that get to the same thing. The classic one in the West is Descartes, René Descartes, the great French philosopher who did this radical inquiry. Basically, what can I know is true? And we usually know the answer to his answer to that in the Latin version of what he said, which is the cogito ergo sum, which is usually translated as I think, therefore I am, but it doesn't mean that. What the cogito actually means is after you scrape away all of the crap that you can doubt, the one thing that you cannot doubt is the presence that is there examining the doubts. You can't get away from that unless you hit yourself repeatedly very, very hard on the head with a hammer. That might help you get away from it, because deep sleep and coma is a very detached state. But for those of us who are not in deep sleep or coma, when you do the inquiry of what can I know is true, it comes down to the only thing that you can know is true in any real sense, in any sense that you cannot find a way to doubt, is the experience of the witness or the knower. Make sense? My phone agrees with me.
Does anyone have any thoughts or questions thus far?
Yeah, who wants to
Aaron
argue
says,
with me about this?
Yeah, Aaron says he gets it. He's cool with it. But I suspect thus far pretty much everyone's, on board.
You never know. I like to not make any assumptions, because this is another one of these things that tend to rattle people.
Yeah, that's good to ask. Aaron says, reminds me of quantum theory.
And that's a good observation, because it's likely that quantum theory might take you someplace very, very similar. My math is not good enough to go there, but some people's are.
So, would you like to continue?
How about you continue?
I guess this kind of makes me reflect on a story I actually shared last week about how, as I dug deeper into my experience of myself, it was a little terrifying, because I had the experience of falling out of what I assumed out of reality. And what that meant was that all of the identifiers I gave myself, like gender, my name, my education, my ethnic background, all of those things, I realized that they were part of the external packaging, in a sense, and not necessarily intrinsic to who I actually am. And that's kind of unsettling when you really sit with that and you don't just toss it around as like a philosophical idea.
Yeah. So, do you all understand about this what can you doubt? Because that question usually takes you to full-blown solipsism. Like, none of this is real. I'm imagining it. I'm in the matrix, right? You got that whole sense of, oh, this could all be something that is being pumped into my consciousness, and it appears to be real.
Yeah.
But the one thing that does not change is your you-ness as witness. And our language breaks down at this point. It's hard to language this in such a way that actually makes sense because English sucks at talking about this stuff.
And there's a lot of baggage wrapped up in the identities we collect. There's a lot of stuff wrapped up in that about our values and beliefs and other people's values and beliefs. And we've talked about stories previously, and this is definitely a related subject in that all of these little packages of I ams have their own stories associated with them.
Yep.
And letting go of those is, I mean, it's a practice more than something you can permanently live in. And I think we talked about that last week as well, or when we talked about stories.
Yeah, you can practice having an ongoing sense of, for lack of a better term, self, though that's not the right word for it.
Mm.
I like witness. You can, because that's the closest thing that they talk about in the Yoga Sutras is uh, you taking your proper place as witness to the given. And witness does not imply personality. And the Yoga Sutras approach this by saying yoga is the cessation of the twistings and turnings of the cognitive mind. When those twistings and turnings have dissipated, what is left is being as witness to the given. At all other times, it says, the witness is identified with the objects to which it witnesses.
Yep. I guess I've often thought of it as the costumes that we wear in day-to-day life. We become identified with those costumes. And some of them we can pull on and off, and some we can't so readily do that. And that makes it a little hard to wrap our heads around this whole witness thing.
Yeah.
Well, all right. I guess I have two lines of inquiry I wouldn't mind pursuing. One is that, I mean, in an obvious sense, you know, the subject can't become an object of its own perception. So in some obvious sense, there's probably nothing to experience in the sense of being, just being. And yet, it does seem like there is a kind of experience of just being present, which, though presumably is not an experience of the self, nevertheless is what, a modality of it, or a way that the self appears in the world. And so I was curious what's your take on that?
Well, I think that you can actually deal with objects and still be in a sense of presence. And the Yoga Sutras say basically that.
Right.
You become witness to the objects presented to consciousness.
But can one of those objects be the self itself? Presumably not, right?
Now,
And yet we have some experiences which seem kind of close to being that. Especially what, in my case, what I'm thinking of is this experience of just being present, which you could experience. I mean, you can experience being present.
yeah.
You know.
Now, Husserl would say yes. He got into a lot of trouble for that. Husserl's transcendental phenomenology is all about reflexive consciousness, turning consciousness back on itself so you can do the phenomenology of pure consciousness. You know, and when he came up with his existential phenomenology, Heidegger and everybody thought that that was the cat's pajamas. He was the coolest thing since sliced bread. But when he suggested that existence did not have to have the primacy, that being could have the primacy, everybody thought he was crazy. But I suspect, and I have argued this for some decades now, that he was in fact onto something. I do believe that you can do transcendental phenomenology. You can turn awareness on itself and just be witness to the witness.
Yeah, and that's a troublesome notion, and I mean I wonder, but I'm not sure if it's a productive line to go down tonight, because I mean that would get us into some pretty hairy.
Well, it's a very amusing line to discuss.
It is. I grant you that. But I'm looking for something simpler, namely, is there an experience of the self, as opposed to anything almost similar to experiences of objects, which initially at least claim are not the self. You know?
Are you?
I'm sorry, what?
Right now, are you?
Yes.
There's your experience of self. In that instant, when you reflect back on you as being, that's what you're talking about. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people have trouble having this. Some people say that they don't have it at all. Some people spend all of their time trying to find themselves, which strikes me as Watts used to say, trying to bite your own teeth.
Now, what is it? What is it that we experience, though, when we so confidently say, "Yes, I am"?
Therein lies the problem, because when you have that true experience, there are no words for it.
Is it that there are no words for it, or is it that we're? I mean, I'm suspicious of this business of no words for it, because we can always make maps of almost anything, and we know the map is not the territory and all that shit. So, I mean, I think we can create a word for it. But
do you remember the first few lines from the Tao Te Ching?
Not off the top of my head, but
Phelan.
I'm missing a word right now. 道可道非常道，名可名非常名. Like I'm missing. I'm screwing up one of the words, but the general concept is there. What can be the path that can be pointed out is not the true path. The object that can be named, the name is not its true name.
Yeah.
That of which we cannot speak, one should remain silent. Yes. Yeah. But still, on what?
The moment that you try and take it into the realm of language, you create a level of abstraction that insulates you from the reality of it. So the classic way to say it in English is that the Tao that can be spoken of is not the true Tao. So what Phelan said is way more accurate.
Right.
And by the way, thank you, Pigman.
Yes.
That was awesome. Yeah.
Good memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I was never particularly moved that much by that particular attitude, because I mean, to call something a tree is not being a tree either. So I mean, we know that once you go to the conceptual, you're no longer dealing with what the concept points to.
You know who the mathematician Feynman was?
Feynman,
Feynman, yes.
the physicist Feynman. Is
Yeah.
Yeah.
Physicist, mathematician.
Right.
Yeah, he made an observation. He said, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, you can know all of the information about every bird in the world. You can know all of the data, but until you experience a bird, you have no idea what you're talking about. At which point, all of the information is a once remove. And that is the problem with this. In my own experience, is that I can try and talk about my own experience of beingness, of witness, and there are no words that I can craft. And I speak like 6 languages, some better than others. But I have found no words in any of them, including in Sanskrit, that actually address what is. The experience of it is pre-verbal.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody argues with that. I mean, obviously the experience is not a verbal experience. The experience of beingness is not a verbal experience. I mean, that's granted, and that's in a sense obvious. But that's different from saying that one cannot speak intelligently about that experience. I mean, Zen
So
master.
far, we're not batting 100 on the speaking intelligently part, man.
The Zen masters spend hours drinking tea and discussing their enlightenment. You know, it's and that depends in part because both of them have had that experience, and so they have a reference.
And if you listen to some of the classic conversations, they usually ends up with one guy taking his shoes off, putting them on his head, and walking out of the room.
That's the student to the master. But you know, the dudes themselves, when they sit around having a cup of tea, can be quite eloquent about, or at least go on for quite a long time.
Yeah, I've heard some of those, and you know what? It was all bullshit as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
It is all smoke and mirrors and cute ways to talk about something that you can't talk about.
And I guess
if you think you can talk about it, give me a demonstration.
I'm not able to do that, but
yeah, I'm not able to do that, and I basically live in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm good with words, and I can't do that.
Okay, so, well, never mind. Again, this probably takes us off to a corner, which may not be a productive one. But I guess the question is, what's so special about this item that one can't talk about it, whereas one can talk about just about everything else?
Can we actually talk about everything else?
Thank you.
Talk about trees and chickens and what we had for breakfast. And
in my own personal experience right now, what I'm finding when I talk to you, even people very close to me, is what is said versus what is heard is oftentimes not the same thing. The same word that it's the same word, but different, like the two people actually mean fundamentally different things when they say that same word. Mm-hmm. And so it's not clear to me then that even in normal conversations, that the conversation is actually as crisp or as, I guess, fully representative as I would have liked it to be.
And then I think you're right about that. And yet, if you and the person you're talking about are both looking at this particular chicken and talking about that chicken, you probably are referring to the same thing. And that's because
you ever seen the movie Rashomon?
Very similar experience. Yes, and that's another issue. But to Pele's point, I think what you're pointing to is the fact that people may not have a joint experience to refer to clarify what it is that they're pointing to, what they're meaning to. But then again,
And since those people may in fact just be hallucinations that you're having as the chicken is, what they are experiencing or not experiencing may be totally meaningless.
okay, so that was kind of my first line of inquiry, and I'm not sure that it's going to progress any place further. So I'm going to believe. The other thing that I was curious about is that, in a sense, the distinction between the witness and that which is being witnessed is still a duality, right? And there's, in some traditions at least, there's a sense in which at some point that duality itself collapses into a not two, yeah, into a single sense. And I wonder what your thoughts are about that.
Something like that. When it happens, again, I'm not sure you can describe it properly. Many great minds over the centuries have tried to describe the direct experience of that. You know, the Yoga Sutras tried to describe it in their description of the Ashtanga, the last 4 limbs especially. And so Advaita has a trap.
Tell us about the trap.
And you see this trap when Advaitists talk about non-duality. Because they'll say, yes, reality is non-dual. And then they will talk about reality and illusion. And I can count reality, illusion. That's 2. Right? That's not 2. That's 2. Subject object is another thing that you can talk about that real Advaita would say, at the base of it, there is no subject object. There is just being. And there are points in times where people hit that state where they realize that the object is being as well as them. They experience the oneness of the being between them and the object that they're witnessing. Again, talking about this is not even close to the experience, which is very frustrating.
But it's the topic of tonight's conversation for you.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it actually takes you anywhere.
Yeah.
So the important thing is to experience that. And to do that, all you have to do is find yourself without reference to object. Who are you when all of the objects that you glue to the you are taken away? Who are you when you are not any of the things that you think you are? Who are you when you are not Ilmar, who has this history? When you remove the is of identity is when you can begin to experience the, for lack of a better word, the witness, even though that's not even a good word for it. And you can begin to experience that reflexively. Being turns upon being to observe itself. One way to start is just to check and see if you are throughout the day. Am I? Oh, yes, I am. Only you do it without the words. The trick is to get beneath the level of abstracting with language. Cherie, you've been very quiet, but I know you must have some thoughts on this.
I have a few thoughts, and I'm just wondering what your purpose for the talk was. Was it to help people recognize, as Nor was saying, about the costumes we wear, the armor we create, the identities that we put to ourselves to present to the world? And if we want to be our most authentic selves, it is that shapeless, formless being without all those labels and things. And can we still see ourselves? This is always really tricky, because as I shift from one vocation to another, people will start labeling me certain things, and I find it extremely uncomfortable.
Right.
Certain things. I go, no, I'm just Cherie. I'm just a person who's helping you do certain things. But it is like I've got to be very aware of the trap of really liking those labels and helping someone understand where I'm coming from by talking too much about what I used to be or what I see myself as, instead of just saying, this is me, and how you see me is how you see me, not me as me trying to say, this is me to you.
Yep.
This is
It gets so weird to try and talk about it.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah, and is that so important? Really? Really, do I have to try and make such a strong argument of, no, this is me, or whatever? But this is one of the things that attracted to me talking to you in the first place, was the lack of hierarchy. No labels.
Yep.
Just two beings exchanging ideas, conversation, company. As simple as that.
Yeah.
What more do I want? Am I looking for an ego boost that you're saying, oh, you're such a good person, you're such a good this and that and everything? But you're very good at saying, don't let that go to your head. And I always keep those things in mind for myself, because the humanness is to try and constantly bolster ourselves up, to push ourselves off other people so that we know where we fit in and how we may be valued.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. So, what is my purpose for this talk? Nor, what is your purpose for this talk?
Well, I don't know. I mean, my purpose for this talk is to get us thinking about those sticky labels that we accumulate on ourselves and the ones that we stick on other people too.
Yes.
Yes. Because, we're sitting here, we're listening to each other's stories and whatnot. And I think some of us may notice that tendency to think, oh, I just learned something about this person. Here's my little sticky note. I'm going to stick on them. And every time I see them, I'm going to think of that sticky note now. And that is, in action, the reification of these fake eyes. So, yeah.
Yeah. And my purpose for the talk is to trick people into looking inward and seeing themselves looking back.
Yep.
That's pretty much usually my hidden agenda for all of these talks, is how do I trick you into noticing the you that is actually you? And the question of what is the I am without the object? When you remove the I am this, the I am that, or I am a something, I am a fireman, and you're not a fireman, even if you put out fires. You're not a student even if you go to school. You're not old even if you're decrepit. When you can just do I am and experience that without all of the things that are attached to it, even if just for a second, it starts catalyzing something in you. And boom, the next thing you know, you're in a state of samadhi. And you don't even know how you got there. And you don't even know you're there until you're out of it and you look back, go, was that a state of samadhi? Cool. So that's my purpose, to invite you to all inquire, who are you? And to keep doing that until you find the answer. All of these questions take you to the same place. You know, Ramana's question was, who are you? Other people's questions are, what is true? What can I know to be true? What is the truth? And it still takes you there. You know, that was Descartes' question.
Yeah, I think
And
we talked about this in the past. Like, the question that triggers you or launches you into that thinking may be differently nuanced, but it takes you to the same destination.
yeah, and it was that was one of our very first talks that we
Right.
ever did, was
Asking
on
the important
asking
questions.
finding the right question. And I
Yeah.
will put a link in the end description, or the end of the video, so that y'all can find that and watch it, because it's a useful talk.
Mushta, can you
Yeah.
make a comment on when you're asking us to look back at ourselves? There's been a lot of talk in our news feeding about how much self-loathing there has been, and we've got a big exponential occurrence of suicide, particularly with young people. They look at themselves and they just hate themselves. The loathing, the self-loathing is incredible. So
Yeah.
can you talk about the falseness of that loathing?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think that they're looking at themselves. They're not seeing the self in the way that I mean it. They're seeing their ego, and that's what they loathe. I think that if they could get past that to, I hate to say the true self, because it's Nora's laughing at me. I really don't like that term, but if they can get to the witness, then they witness that that self-loathing is just another object given to consciousness, that their ego has that built into it, but they are not their ego. And I mean, I know from personal experience that that sense of I amness is a sovereign protection against suicidal thought. If you
That
have that strongly,
true self, you mean?
yeah, that
A
that
sense of
sense
that.
of the I am that is the witness to the given. If you are that, then things like suicide don't even enter into the equation, because you know that's like your ego wanting to kill your body. And from the point of view of the witness, that's absurd. It's really hard to get people who are stuck in that there. I mean,
Yeah, it
you know,
is.
it's a Sisyphean task, as it were.
This is why I was saying it's like stickiness,
Yeah,
because it really is. It really is like a stickiness. And to get unstuck, as we've often said, is sometimes a formidable task, especially when you're really in those identifications.
Yeah. When you're stuck playing out your stories, it's nearly impossible to let go of them because you think you are that. And that's why if I was working with somebody who was suicidal, this would not be my first approach. I wouldn't just go to them, look, just be the witness. It'll all be better, even though it would.
Yeah,
But
in a sense, but this is also why we talk about what's that word? There's generative and then there's remedial. Yes.
Yeah, so if I was working with somebody who was actually suicidal, I would take a totally different approach and work on their ego and help them clean that up so that they could let go of the self-loathing enough that they could have a break and eventually discover their I amness. But it's really tricky. Does that answer your question, or does that make it more obscure?
No, that's excellent, because I'm also seeing a rise in both male and female uptaking plastic surgery for what I perceive as not a particularly good reason. And they're all starting to look the same. The shape of their eyes, the shape of their nose, the big mouth, the whole thing. And I'm thinking, wow, you've lost your uniqueness. And there was no need to go down that path. And these bodies have been tortured into some uniformity of perceived beauty. And I just
Oh
see
yeah,
that
the
as
societal weight of that is just insane.
Mm-hmm.
Here in America, women having gray hair is like perceived as this horrible thing. And so I know women in their 50s and 60s that are still coloring their hair, even though their hair is grayer than mine, because society says if you have gray hair as a woman, you're like in the trash heap or something.
Expired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that sense of true self, or whatever we want to call it, with the sense of the witness, a lot of that no longer matters. But in cases where somebody is in danger of Great Depression and suicidal ideation, taking the straight path is usually not indicated. You got to do the remedial work first.
I have the structure to stand on in order to, I mean, I don't think for everyone that their experience is going to be like mine, where it was a little bit scary to realize that all of these labels and stories I made up about myself and that people made up about me were meaningless. I don't necessarily think everyone encounters that with fear, but nonetheless, if I had come to that at a time where I felt very sensitive and fragile, that might have been much more challenging to me to take that on. And that's why you do kind of have to build a relatively healthy sense of ego in order to take that next step out of the pain, out of the sense of being inadequate and all that stuff, and realize that those things are meaningless. It's kind of like a little step-by-step process.
I forget who said it, but somebody said you got to have an ego for a good ego first before you can dissolve it or transcend it.
Yeah, I personally, I do think that's true.
Okay, I'm shutting up long enough to let anybody else get in here before I another one of my weird trips here, but
Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Welcome. Glad you made it.
Yeah, so am I.
So Zainab, what do you think?
I'm thinking when you ask this question and these issues of identity pop up, do they have layers? Like, is it you have a glimpse of some of those eyes and then eventually they come in the like a
I think for most people, it's exactly like that. Yeah. It's like peeling an onion. Very few people just chop the onion in half. Most people take it off one layer at a time.
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like some of them I just chopped right through, and then others are peeling away gradually.
Okay.
Mustaqim, what do you think?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Yeah, the experience, but then the person then come back again to the world and still have to pay the bills, etc.
Yeah, but can you pay the bills while keeping that sense of yourself? I mean, I can cook dinner and still hold that sense of isness. So I assume that you can pretty much do anything while you're doing it.
Sometimes the graffiti of the graffiti of the what to say the problem is sometimes take away that is why that I-ness, the isness, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I have had the experience of being shaken out of it by something that stirred me up and stirred up one of my stories about myself, or triggered feelings of reattaching to one of my identities in the context of something happening around me or to me. And I think that it does take growing and practicing to be able to hold on to this quote unquote true self in the midst of a stressful situation. And sometimes we realize we're in a situation where we have a role to play. Maybe that other person is not ready to meet us as our quote unquote, or experience us as that true self. And so, in that context, we can consciously choose to play the role. But it's kind of like you have one foot in and one foot out when you're doing that.
in a sense, that's probably one of the almost maybe not unique things. One of the things which sort of makes us human is that we have kind of a foot in both camps. We have a foot in the transcendent realm, that's pure being. That's in consciousness. We also have a foot in this very practical world of forms in which we have to operate. And for me, this trick has always been, how do you really harmonize that in a beautiful way? I guess it really becomes an aesthetic question more than anything else. But,
It's an important question, though.
Mm.
Human beings can experience themselves as individual. Human beings can experience themselves as universal. You can think of those as two poles. And then there's the field that those two poles create where a human being can experience themselves simultaneously as individual and universal. And therein lies a field of argument that is very interesting. Can it be done? Should it be done? Or do you just flip back and forth very, very quickly? What's really going on?
And there's the conceptual puzzle that relates to that. And again, I mean, that brings us in the realm of concepts, which we may or may not want to get into. But I mean, the sense of being a witness often for me is a sense of being a separate witness, where you and I are separate witnesses. And yet, certainly in that vita view, there is only a singleton, only one I, you know, and if I look at, well, what would be the difference between you and I, I'm always looking at objects of perception, you know, so they're always, in a sense, part of the scenery, which I use to differentiate, to say, hey, you and I are different. So I'm kind of wondering what your take on that is.
Well, I can tell you that I have had the experience of the single being looking out through many eyes. And it was incredibly profound. I don't look for that experience again, but I've had it, so I know it's possible.
And is that an experience, or is that somehow closer to the truth?
I'm not sure that matters.
Well, it kind of, I guess now I put the question is, what significance, if any, do you attribute to that experience? Does it inform you about?
I attribute the significance of, it demonstrates that there is a state of being where you can perceive the oneness of everything through all of the eyes around you at once. From the person sitting across to you to the bird looking in through the window.
Because it seems to me, at least to me, one of the very interesting questions is, what makes us individuals unique, even though in some sense we are presumably one being, one eye, looking through all these multiple windows. And I wonder whether the old notion, you know, of a soul or something like that is involved here. There is a sense of uniqueness also to us, as well as this sense of not maybe unity, but of oneness. And I at least don't have a comfortable feel for how those both balance in.
Yeah, it's not something that we have near enough time to talk about this evening, because we're going to have to end fairly quickly. But my philosophy professor years and years ago postulated what he called his 3 philosophical truths. The first one was humankind, man, is individual. Second was, first was man is individual. First philosophical fact. Second philosophical fact, man is universal. Third philosophical fact, man can be experienced as simultaneously as universal and individual. I'm paraphrasing slightly here because he said it much more eloquently.
Well, that's a way of stating an issue, but now.
No, that was his premises. Yeah. And I will tell you that I spent close to 5 years debating with him the validity of these ideas, and that argument is still going on. So,
do you think an extended dialogue on that topic would clarify anything or not?
No.
No. Okay.
No, I think that what will clarify it is your own personal experience of investigating it.
Right. Okay.
And the intellect is a poor tool for this in many ways. And you know me, I like intellect, but it is not the end all and be all for some of this stuff.
But it can be sometimes useful, Claire, to dissolve confusions and stuff. But anyway,
Nah, rarely. Intellect doesn't dissolve confusion. Intellect
creates confusion.
creates confusion.
Yeah. But you know, it's a little bit like saying swords can do damage as well as do good. You know, and you're a swordsman, so yeah.
Swords cut people. That's what they do.
And so does intellect sometimes when properly used, but and dissect. But anyway, it's obviously a way larger topic than.
It's a huge topic,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, there are some interesting models which I wouldn't mind exploring. One of those models which I find quite suggestive is multiple personalities, or alters as they're known these days, which
Yep.
is interesting enough. I mean, there's, you know, one, in this case, human being who's got multiple personalities or egos, which are in a sense them, but act independently, you know, to some degree. That could get us into some interesting discussions, I suspect. But
Yeah. Have you ever experienced a true multiple?
I have not. No.
Yeah, I have like 3 times.
Oh, okay.
It was very, very interesting
Heard that.
and very, very strange. And that's something we can talk about at a later date. We would get way lost on that.
Right. But it's fun to get lost. I mean, there's all these fun woods to explore.
Yeah, but we have all these people sitting there going, what the hell are they talking about?
Right. Okay.
Or
I can
I
see
want a snack.
you already
Yeah.
making faces at me. All right.
So, Noor?
Yeah.
I am thinking that we should probably wrap this up because I know Cherie has to take off and do things, and
Who
Palin,
says no?
he doesn't.
Palin has already.
Yeah, Palin
Taking
has
her
left
leave.
the building.
Yep.
Not today. But I do want to just say one practical
Yeah.
thing is that say you're in the middle of a high family drama and people are calling you names, and your capacity to remain genuinely still and calm as someone is giving you a verbal blowaway will give you an idea of whether you're sitting in your I am or not. Because
Mhm.
if you believe
Oh boy, ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
if you believe everything that a person, whether they're family or friends or colleagues, fling at you, and you get yourself bogged down in that, then you just got lost in your own ego because you believe an untruth. You are in your I am. None of that is real.
Yep. And it
And
drives them crazy when you do that.
It does, doesn't it? But I do think that one way I experience this is sometimes it's like a physical solidness in my body when I feel like I'm in the zone where anyone can say anything to me, and it's just I hear it and I receive it, but I'm impervious to the damage it can do because I feel grounded in that sense of my I am. So this is not just this, you know, this philosophical, okay, I'm going to tell myself that I'm going to think of it in a certain way. This is not about thinking. It's not even necessarily about feeling. It's in the body. So we should probably touch on that at some point.
Yep, make a list.
Yeah. So that's what I got.
I'm curious, there. Usually what I feel in the body are those identities, or those layers, or those contractions, rather than the set. Well, I mean, the sense of groundedness is in a sense in the body, but that solidity that I thought you were talking about, usually associate with contractions and identities, rather than the feeling of
I
self.
think that's something to explore.
Yeah.
And see if you might be able to find that groundedness and solidity without seeking it in those identities. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Right. No, it makes perfect sense. Except, the only thing I was reacting to was, your suggestion that you have a sense of solidity about it. And
Yeah, I
for
mean,
me,
it's not an
solid being grounded or solid
inflexibility.
being massy.
Yeah, it's not an inflexibility. It's just the sense of having possession of yourself, having the sense of I'm okay and I don't need anything outside of myself to give me that reassurance and that sense of groundedness.
Gotcha.
And it's also not delusional. It's a real sense of I have this, I'm okay. I don't need to hurt anyone else either to feel okay right now.
Got it.
All right. So that's all I got to say. Are you? Ask
I am.
yourself.
Yeah.
And I'd suggest that you might try Ramana's suggestion. Take some time to ask yourself, who am I? And get rid of all of the answers of who you think you are until you have something left that you can't refute. Could be fun. Might be tedious. People used to pay huge amounts of money to go to these things called enlightenment intensives, where you would sit around with other people asking each other that question for days.
Yeah, that sounds tedious.
Yeah, I don't think anybody ever actually got enlightened from doing it. Or if they did, they weren't talking. But they were paying through the nose.
All right, so do we have any other thoughts or should we wrap up?
I am thoughtless.
Yeah, I think everyone else is doing okay too.
All right, then let us wave goodbye to each other and I will turn off the camera.
Bye.
Bye.